this week because last week I didn't have it recorded. So this week it'll be recorded.
Sounds good. So that's who it was, you guys. It was Chris. I was trying to remember who did it before.
Yep. And
we were just introducing ourselves.
I see another Michiganite there. We don't see her, but it's Ann Zanger. She's been awesome in Michigan. Hi, Ann.
Hey, friends. Sorry, I'm at the office.
just in case my internet disappears every once in a while. So if I disappear for a couple of minutes, it'll spin around and hopefully I'll jump back in. So please just keep that conversation going. Before we get going, does anybody came with things that they specifically wanted to talk about? I have lots of things to talk about, but are there topics that you all have that you're curious about, or are there things that you want to share?
Well, for me, it's just the elephant in the room, like ideas for a remote O&M.
Okay.
O&M assessment.
Okay. Evaluations was at the top of my list. So, okay.
I wasn't here for your last group meeting for this particular group, so
yeah,
I hope I don't ask any repetitive questions.
I think it's still good to share. We did go over some of the things on ideas for remote instruction and places to find some of those resources. And we'll review those again today. Every time we do this, we come up with new stuff, and each week we're learning a little bit more. The other thing that we were asked to do when the moderators were first talking was to ask if people had specific topics they're trying to look at. Do they want to have additional breakout rooms or to remove some of the breakout rooms? So they asked if we could also kind of look at different topics. And I imagine both of those things, evaluations, assessment, and also the remote instruction in general are pretty good discussions that kind of carry across all age groups, at least for the moment.
This is Felicia too. I'm also from Michigan. I think my colleague Abby will be here soon too, but I guess the idea of providing in-person to remote O&M learners
Okay.
as well. And if anybody's doing that.
Can I just pick your brain a little bit to make sure I understand? When you say providing in-person to remote learners, are you talking about going out to their home or to their home areas to do a little face-to-face, even though they are primarily receiving remote?
Correct.
Okay.
So they might be getting TCVI remotely, or, you know, we're kind of in a place where we're still looking at planning with the teams that are choosing the remote option.
Yes.
And some are doing remote in buildings.
Okay.
So virtual in buildings, and some are doing virtual at home.
Okay.
And
it can't be Lake Michigan behind you, can it? I haven't ever seen a I haven't ever seen a
No.
background that's in motion before, so you're really throwing me with that one.
No, this is it's a background. I got lucky with a moving one.
Okay.
No palm trees at Lake Michigan yet, but
They blend in with the Petoskey stones.
yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, those are the kind of questions that we're kind of like having to face. Like, what are we able to do at this point, or what are we not able to do, or what are people doing, what are people not doing?
I'm with you, Felicia. I'm at Perkins School for the Blind, and we're doing now, you know, everybody's either remote or some form of hybrid. We've decided to stay strictly remote, except for certain O&M things. So we're trying to make plans now to do some in-person stuff with some of our kids that are technically still remote.
Right? Yeah.
Felicia, what district are you in?
Kirisa, Kalamazoo County.
Okay.
So I've got Portage Public Schools myself that has an in-person option, like face-to-face. Then there's the countywide virtual, and then there's the actual public school virtual. So there's 3 different options in a particular district out of 8 or 9 districts in our county that are actually doing the face-to-face.
Yeah, I work with different districts, and so they're all doing different things. And I'm also, it's a question, but just to throw out there for a comment, I've heard one person was chose it because the child has behavior issues. And so she does better with remote. So she wanted to do remote just because of that, not for super worry about COVID. So mom had said she could meet me in the neighborhood, or I can come to their house and just take her out in the neighborhood. So I'm probably going to do that with her if they'll allow it. The problem is when we went remote in March, the parent is really one end or the other. So, I mean, she's cooperative, but she's got a really difficult job parenting this child, and it's a step parent. And so when I got a hold of her, she would be, yeah, but she wouldn't reply to my stuff, and she wouldn't answer half the time. So it
Well, and
didn't do.
I think that's helpful to kind of know what else is going on out there. And I think with, you know, these plans that were put in place from that March to June time, I'm sure every county and every state kind of did it different. But
Yes.
for when we had closure in Michigan, we had specific plans that we had put together. And so it was specific to what was actually going to be focused on. And O&M was, you know, one that a lot of parents didn't really feel like it was a priority at the time. But now that we're at a place where you have to make a choice, and IEP goals and objectives are still being worked on is the idea, right? So I guess if it came down to a meeting where they said we would like to postpone this, then I guess an amendment would have to be done, right? So we'd have to do that on the IEP to kind of reflect that. So that way, if there's regression beyond what's already been there, that could possibly be part of it down the road.
Right. Yeah. That's what, and the exact same thing that you said at the beginning. And now Illinois has put out, there's this form that we're supposed to use that has to do with, okay, it's not rewriting the IEP, but it's basically writing stuff. How are you going to do this stuff remotely? If you're doing it remotely, everyone isn't, but they put it out because many people are. And I'm just.
So like the supplementary aids and services. So that way we've also heard it of, if we go back into phase 3 and we're all remote, then there's kind of like a backup plan. Is that, I mean, that's kind of how they worded it to us, is like, we're going to be probably, when an IEP comes up for a kid, we'll do supplementary aids and services, but list it as like, if things were, you know, go back into phase 3, that we would be able to still support in a certain way, but it'd be mentioned in the IEP somewhere.
Sure. I really have no idea. I just glanced at the paper because I haven't had any kids yet, because I don't have my caseload yet, and I'm trying to figure out who I have. And I have a new supervisor, and so I share office with deaf and hard of hearing. So they're the ones that are all scrambling about getting these. It's, you know, initials. So it's an individual remote lesson plan or something. I don't know what it is. And so what they have to do is like just write in there how it's different, what exact hours they're seeing them, what they're doing in regard to the IEP. They have to do that for every student. They don't have to call a meeting. They don't have to have an addendum. They're just writing this I'd say supplemental, except for a lot of the kids are on it already. If you know what I'm saying, it's not in case we go back.
Rose,
If we go,
are they using the phrase continuity of learning plan?
no.
Well, we are in
I
Michigan.
wonder if I can find it.
It's
Yeah, no, Illinois is odd.
one of the phrases that's here in Texas is continuity of learning plan, and the state education agency is also asking that we write 2 sets of goals for every individual student. So we have one set of goals that is in person, regular life, and then we have another set of goals that are remote, so that whatever the outcome is, like if numbers spike and everybody goes back, then those that were in face-to-face, now you've got a remote goal that's already in place. But they also want it to go forward forever, so that if there's something like in Texas, we get the hurricanes, then if a student's out for a week for a hurricane, that's also what will function when the student can't be at school during that week that they are remote based on a weather incident or a school closure of some kind. So they're going beyond just the pandemic into regular life.
Yeah, Chris, all I can say is I'm glad I'm retiring, because this is just crazy. The people that are making these what they're trying to do is cover their butt. And of course, with IDEA and with the IEPs, it's different, you know, I mean, anyway, so I think that is crazy that you have to write two, but I understand why they chose that. I understand that it kind of makes sense, but now everybody gets to write double IEPs. I mean, who has time to write one, you know? And so you guys get to now write double IEPs. I mean, basically, because it's partly different if you're remote because you might not be able to do the in-person things. Is that true?
I missed the question. Could you say it one more time?
Oh, just that I'm just saying it's crazy. So basically you're having to write two IEPs because some kids might be the same remote, like if you're teaching cane skills, but some kids, if you're teaching street crossings, will have to work on something else maybe. So you have to write two different IEPs. Is that true?
It's not two IEPs. It's basically the same. They're part of the same IEP, but they're two options that could
Sure.
alternate during that time. And there's also the description for the parents to understand that there are some things that we can do when we're face-to-face that we can't do remotely. And so we might even have different service levels. So, you know, I might see a student for an hour if we're face-to-face, or 2 hours if we're doing bus travel, but that 2 hours would be just excruciating through remote.
Right.
We might have 45 minutes remote.
Sure.
And
So, Chris, I just have a question. Do you know how long this meeting is? How long does this meeting go today?
This is only the second time I've done it, but the last time we went for basically an hour in our discussion here, and then we went back and there was another portion at the end of that. So basically we went from, let's see, you guys are in Eastern time zone. We went from 3:15 to 4:15, and then we went back and I think we did till 4:30 with the main.
Okay.
So it's basically.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, and Kathy, in the chat, you had asked about the remote instruction. I just wanted you to know that I put some resources there that we talked about last time.
Good.
There's a live binder that has a bunch of remote lesson stuff. The first tab in the binder has links to other things, suggestions, or like Diane Bronner did lots of other things, suggestions. And then there's a guidelines document that is being built from contributions from lots of different people, and to hopefully have some set of standards that people feel comfortable with, but it's just a work in progress. And then there's a Google form if anybody has ideas that they want to input for that document. But there's lots of stuff that people are coming up with in terms of lesson ideas, ways to carry things out. And a lot of it's just everybody's creating it as we go along.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I don't know if you had specific areas of things that you were looking for.
You know, I'll look at it, but just pretty much everything, because I've been doing most things with a parent in the community. But now I have these parents that cannot be with me with this student, and she needs a lot of support. So I'm just trying to figure out that piece.
So if the parent can't be there, it really varies from what the child's ability level is. There are some that you can send home things that, furthest example is someone who lives in an Amish community. They have no internet, they have no phone, so they can't do this type of discussion. And so the O&M has to send things through the US mail, like a tactile map, or kind of like, here's a list of a treasure hunt. Here's what you're going to do. It's basically like you're setting up games for a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout troop. You're just spelling out the details, and then you hope that the family will carry through with it. Because at that point, we can't do anything but ask them to assist, because we can't physically be there, and they're not able to connect with us remotely. And then I've had others that will literally show up in their car and do kind of like, I can't remember the fun phrase somebody used, but they called it like O&M stalking, where they were driving, following the parent so that they wouldn't be close for, you know, the health factor, but they could watch from inside their car what the child was doing. And they could even go back and forth and pretend to be that car that, you know, when did the student hear it? Because here's the O&M instructor being that car.
Yeah, I've done that too. Yeah.
So there's different ways of doing that depending on the level of support that the parent can provide.
So I guess this is Felicia again. I guess, you know, would that be an expectation, is that parents are involved, especially if they've picked a remote plan. And I get it, because there's families that work and have their kids doing remote at home, and maybe have, you know, other people in the family helping out with that. But I guess when I think of like early on services that I provide, it's a coaching model in the sense of, I'm not here to just do all the work. Like, there's going to be some reinforcement after we're done. And I guess I want it to come out the right way, but wouldn't we want the parents to be in, you know, or somebody representative of the family, so, and or, you know, friends of the family, so that way these things are being reinforced outside of the time that we're doing instruction?
It's ideal, but it can't be required or an expectation, because you might have one parent with 6 kids, and the child we're working with could be the one with the least amount of needs. So the parent could be just fully involved with the other children, or with work and trying to do the other children. So all we can do is have those conversations with the parents to try to figure out what are they comfortable supporting at the moment. And we also have other parents who are so involved, we have to ask them to back off, because they're doing the work for the children. It's really becomes that, like you're working with another team member, like you're meeting with a classroom teacher, trying to set up how they can support your goals and how you can support their goals. But we have to have that same conversation with the
I don't know
parents.
if anybody else is having problems, but you keep cutting off on me, Chris.
Yes, he's freezing up. He's freezing up.
Sorry.
You were just freezing up.
It's just a conversation with the parents.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's helpful, because I think it is like, ultimately we would like that, but certainly we have to be open to every situation. So,
but like you said, it can't be required, Chris. Is that, I mean, is that what you?
It's not, even in the best of times, it couldn't really be required. We can say that a parent is one of the providers or responsible parties in this, but we can't really hold them to that. Because
right.
We're the ones that are getting paid. We're the professionals. We can be held to that. But especially now during these remote times, all we can do is have that conversation to see what parents are willing to do.
Right. Yeah. Well, I know with one where, and this was during the like March, April, that remote time, which is different than now. We are having different expectations of what we're supposed to be doing. You know, before we were supposed to be trying to make contact and you know, maybe just continuing services. And I'm not saying that as an O&M, but just in general, because I'm getting no direction for O&M from anybody. That's why I come to you guys. and now, you know, it's a different expectation, but at least then the kids that there was very limited ability to work with them or couldn't do anything like online. I stole from, I think it was Perkins, like April mobility calendar. And so, you know, go on a scavenger hunt, do this, do that. And I talked to parents on the phone or texted them. And I said, look, here's some stuff to do. These would be great. You can pick them. You can do one every day. You can do none. You can do 3. Because the parents are so stressed at that point. Now people are kind of getting used to this kind of way of life, you know, a little bit more. But at the time there was such stress that it was, we have t-shirts at our school that says, what is it? The taxonomy before Bloom, something, the hierarchy, you know, of needs. I can't think of the first name. Maslow, is it Maslow?
Maslow's hierarchy?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So we have t-shirts that say Maslow before Bloom.
Yes.
Because that's where we were, you know, and now we're having to go forward and, you know, miraculously provide more and different with less. But so just things like that. And it's an individual plan. And so for every student, it's going to be different. And I had kids that were very involved, and we were using FaceTime and learning how to do stairs. And I had kids that, you know, I would get on the phone once a week with the mom who had 6 kids, and her youngest was one with visual impairment. And we talked, and that was it. I mean, she'd say, I'll try, and he won't even hold his cane. And, you know, and I just tried to, the 4-year-old tried to get her to do something, you know? So Yeah, it's every possible level.
And there's some things where it might be that you've changed from having maybe, I'm going to shoot myself in the foot here, but instead of having something very serious like the exact grip that we're doing, maybe we're going to do a yoga routine. So it's still about movement. We're going to reach our hands up and we're going to bend over, or we're going to, you know, there's lots of different ways to make those kind of fun activities. And we'll probably get a little more buy-in and involvement from the kids so the parent can step away in those types of situations where you do have 6 kids. That's a lot for the parent to contend with. So we have to change our expectations for the instruction too.
Chris, just a quick reminder to start recording if you haven't.
Thank you, Lucas. We are recording.
All right, see you later. Hope you're having fun.
Thanks.
Settle down in here now. Okay, it's getting noisy. You can hear you in the big room. Okay, bye-bye.
So for those that are providing the in-person instruction, is anybody driving with their personal vehicle? We were basically told, you know, that we would not be driving at this point due to the phase that we were in.
You mean driving with your client in the car?
Correct.
Oh,
right.
Yeah, I'm not. I wouldn't do it even if they gave me permission right now.
Okay, I just
At this
wanted
point,
to.
we're not allowed to have the students.
Okay.
When I was in Maryland, where the O&Ms were regularly using their personal vehicles and being reimbursed, they were told no one shall use their own personal vehicles because the school vehicles were treated with a special application of some antibacterial that basically would keep everything safe for whatever it was, 6 months. And even if the O&M wanted that treatment done to their own vehicle, that wasn't going to be possible. The challenge then became there's only so many vehicles to go around. So how do you make it, how do you get to your lessons? And fortunately, it's just the dynamics of what we're in right now. It's very difficult to make those surfaces safe. And again, we're in close proximity without the wind.
Well, I agree. And I think it's good that we're not being asked to drive at this point. But I guess the question comes to those kids that are doing remote and parents are really busy. I mean, we're just limited to where we're going to be able to work with them, right? Whether it's going to be right in their actual neighborhood, right in their actual yard.
Correct.
So in those spaces, or they're being dropped off at a neutral, decided upon location and then picked up again.
So it depends on parent ability to bring student to a specific place. There are some people, for instance, who might say that the parent's going to bring the child to an intersection and you may not even be there, but the child is there sitting in the chair listening to the intersection and you're connected through Zoom so that you're both hearing the same intersection, talking about the way the sounds change at this different type of traffic light, something like that. If it's to go out into, let's say the student's in a rural area and the parent can't drive, then you're kind of in the rural area. That's about all that you have in order to do outdoor travel.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Susan Langendon.
I'm again talking from what we did from March till May because I haven't seen students yet. But I had one student, again, it depends totally on the student. She had functional vision. She's very high academic, very motivated, and very, very picked up the mobility stuff really well. Her mom was very, very involved anyway before COVID and very cooperative. So she was working on, not business or combination, like residential. So I told mom, I said, look, this is what we could do. You can choose to do it or not. I said, go for a walk with her down to the square and don't make her make the decision across the street. Take her cane, because this is a student that didn't use her cane regularly. Take her cane, go up to the stop sign or whatever to the street and have her tell you if it's safe to go or not. And then you just, but don't have her go, have her tell you if it's safe. And then you guys can walk all the way to wherever. And she was comfortable doing that. And then I just said, take some pictures or videos and send them.
I lost your audio in the last part there.
Gotta love Zoom.
It's always a learning lesson.
It's a learning in patience.
I don't know what happened, Rose. It doesn't show that you're muted, but I can't hear you. I'm not sure what happened. I'm gonna throw out a couple of discussion topics. Hopefully we'll get Rose's audio back. Some other things that as options is using some 3D models and tactile production. If you have folks around that can do the swell paper maps, or you have somebody with a 3D printer, those are things that you can make and send to the student. Or if the student has, let's say, an embosser at home or wherever they're based at, those are things that you can use. There's also activities to work on from home are that whole idea of transferring a two-dimensional image or a three-dimensional image into two-dimensional space. So they're kind of those pre-map skills, so that they begin to understand, like if you have a ball and you take the ball and you put it on print, it becomes a circle. Do they understand that that ball the circle represents the ball? Or the chair that would look basically like a letter H, when we take a picture of a chair and we put it into a map format, it's going to have a different shape to it than the three-dimensional image that they're used to. So those are some of the concepts that we can do to help with developing, so that when we are back face-to-face, they will have advanced their skills for understanding tactile information. Did anybody think at all? I don't know if anybody was able to attend the presentation that Bill Kaler did on risk assessment, along with Mary Tellefson and Sarah Moreau. Some of the things that we've talked about already in terms of utilizing parents as helpers goes along with that risk assessment and what we're asking the parent or the siblings to do, because sometimes it's the siblings who are the helpers. Anybody have any thoughts on that after the discussion?
Was that last week?
Yes, it was last week. I've forgotten the day, but I think it was the 28th for some reason, but I've forgotten the date. Rose, you want to
be honest, I looked it over. I read his whole paper. It was actually really good. And I have a meeting set up with our O&M staff next week to kind of review it and talk about how it affects us and our practice at Perkins and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see what everybody else has to say.
Oh, terrific. Thank you, Kristen.
How can we get where can I find that paper?
I don't know. I missed the mailings at the beginning. Kristen, did you get an email with that attached?
I did. I'm looking for it. Let's see if I can find it.
I think the email address for the gentleman who was able to send it out, put it in the chat. I could put it in our chat real quick too. He said to email him and he would send a copy.
Thank you.
Chris?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm driving, so I apologize if I cut in and out. Is this a good moment? Is this a good moment to talk about safety? In general, if a student has chosen virtual, we're being advised that we can go to the student's home and provide O&M instruction in their home. And I work in Flint, Michigan, which has some notoriously unsafe areas. I just wondering if anyone had any thoughts about safety in that aspect.
So you've been instructed the district's virtual, but they said that O&M can go into the home. And
what we've been instructed is that if a family is, no, let me see if I can get this correctly. If a district is all virtual, then we provide instruction all virtually. If a student is face-to-face in their district, then we can provide face-to-face instruction with them. If a family has chosen virtual, then we have to work with the family on their comfort level about receiving face-to-face instruction. And if they're comfortable, then we can proceed with face-to-face instruction in their home environment in that context.
Right.
But you know how this is kind of a moving target, and there aren't a lot of answers here in Michigan yet. Well, so.
And one of the things that I've heard from others that are doing a similar model is that because people are very comfortable in their own home, though they understand the risks of COVID and such, which might be why they're opting to have virtual by choice, that they often need the reminder to put on their mask. So they may feel very comfortable with the other members of the family not wearing a mask, and you show up and you would want them to wear a mask for your safety as well as theirs. And so it can be helpful to have a routine or an understanding that says, I'm going to call beforehand and just remind you to wear your mask. And then sometimes even you may still show up and they still don't have their mask. So you may have to kind of have a list of understanding that's when I'm there, everyone at the home will be wearing their mask, so that it makes it a little bit safer environment. Just like when we go to a store and it says, if you're going to enter, masks are required. If you're going to enter as a teacher, masks are required, so that you're providing for everyone's safety. And then when the lesson's over, they can take their mask off. But to have those basic understandings beforehand can be very helpful.
I'll jump in, Chris. This is Felicia. And so for early on, for the birth to 3 that I serve, the early on has really done a nice job of, like, we each can create our own, well, it's a screener, like a protocol screener that was sent out to all of us where we could edit our name in it. And then we would send that within 24 hours before a visit, and the family has to fill it out. So just like when we're doing our screenings before we go into buildings, it's the same thing for the families that are receiving services from us in that piece. And so when you guys are talking about that, I'm like, oh, that would be awesome for O&M in this case, because it is so unique and is very similar to that whole home visit thing if we're getting into those situations. And so having something that the ISD or the organization or agency creates under an agreement of this could be sent ahead of time, and if they pass A, B, and C, then we can go to their home, and they've agreed it, they've signed it, they've said there's nobody with flu symptoms, they've, you know, agreed to wear a mask, and then you get there and they're not, then you'll say, well, it doesn't look like we're prepared to do in person today, I can do a virtual visit with you at a later time, or whatever that might be. So those are just some ideas, but I feel like that would be helpful to have something that the administration's kind of saying, this is what we would like to use. And obviously that's a hard thing to ask for, but I would say, you know, KRESA early on has that for our early on visits. And I would almost think of extending that and creating something just like that and getting my supervisor's approval for the O&M for the parents that would like that, and make sure that it would be agreed upon.
I think that's excellent. I mean, I've done that. I've had some written agreements about that, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, Ann, you're mentioning that you're not comfortable in some homes, like for your safety. And I have been in that situation as well. And I've just said you know, because of COVID and being indoors, and that I felt like it was safer to be outside. And so I've just provided outside the home. And I felt like that was safer all the way around, you know, especially with COVID and being outside and not being in an indoor setting where you can't control what other people are doing with their masks.
And some of this will change, especially for y'all in Michigan. When we get into a cooler season, things are going to change again.
No, then it becomes more remote, for sure.
Well, and again, is there like a neutral location that could be, you know, I know transportation can be often a huge issue for families to being able to get places, even if they don't have vehicles that are reliable and so forth. But is there, you know, I guess an idea of a neutral location where it maybe is owned by ISD or an ESA or a community building where there's stairs and so forth?
That's a great idea. But the problem sometimes is they don't have access to that transportation. So it's kind of a catch-22. But I think that is a good idea, personally.
Has anyone tried having homework go back and forth at all? When I say homework, kind of like examples that you have a student work with, like a tactile map. Has anybody tried providing things for home to see if they could utilize it? or mailing things to them so that they had materials that you wouldn't be able to, you have a copy, they have a copy kind of thing to facilitate instruction?
I've done that. This is Kathy, and I've also have found that Google Forms are working really well. Where I will, especially for low vision students, like I'll put maps or questions, or like just look, it's like the questionnaire form, and the kids seem to really like that because I put like pictures in and videos, and they respond to it. They give me answers, and I check it and correct it. You know, they get graded on it more or less.
Is it Google Classroom or Google Forms that you're able to paste those?
It's Google Forms.
Oh, that's terrific. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. And for those that have actually returned to some face-to-face instruction in the schools, are you finding that that's doable with being able to have safe distances with students and being able to avoid other students in the hallway, so to speak, so that everything is kind of functioning at that 6-foot bubble? Maybe nobody's returned yet. I know here in Texas we have some that have, some that haven't. So when do you all return, after Labor Day?
We're returning, well, we returned officially last week, but students started today. So
here in Massachusetts, our students got this additional 10-day period due to some, we'll call it negotiations between the teachers union and the Department of Ed.
Very good word. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a good way to put it. But anyway, they don't start till mid-September, but we have gotten permission on a couple students to get in first to work on the new routes, because everything's one way, stairwells are one way, you know, different routes to get to places. So we've got some permissions to go in and start that at least.
And Kristen, have you all come up with a standard system to make those directional indicators tactile or accessible?
We're working on it.
I understand.
Yeah, the few kids that we're working on now are going to be better off just learning them and not having to deal with the tactile markers, because the school can't guarantee that nobody else will touch them, nobody else is going to clean them, all of that part. So
yeah, hadn't thought about that part, but yeah.
Yeah.
I know that on the listserv there were discussions about using the cordage or the thin rope under the tape for some of the floor indicators and different things. So
yeah, I hadn't thought of the floor. That'd be a good one. Yeah.
We're still in the process of determining what to do with virtual students, whether we're providing in-person instruction for them or virtual instruction for them. And the question that I received from our supervisor was the monitoring distance of 6 feet. Is that a safe distance to commit to when you're doing an outdoor lesson? And yeah, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. I think it really depends on the student. But for maybe a more mature student who is a more independent traveler, could you commit to, yes, we will remain 6 feet apart unless emergency situation arises? Yeah. Do you agree with that, or thoughts?
There's lots of different. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I've not done anything yet because I haven't seen students yet, but one thought about that, and maybe it was brought up in one of the other meetings too, is to have something like walkie-talkies or something like that, and so that you're giving input. So even though you're 6 feet away, I mean, you probably all do this. My kids, the first thing they learn is stop, and I won't take them places if they won't. And I tell them, if I say stop, you just stop. Don't ask any questions. Don't do anything. And then ask, you know, so I mean, that's like a thing I teach all my kids. And so having stop isn't always the right answer. Stop might get you ran over by a car, but, you know, having the walkie-talkies or something like that, so you still can give immediate feedback without being within 6 feet. But I think it depends so much, and excuse me, but I'm driving in my car now, so I don't have my video on and stuff. It depends so much on the individual student, you know, what they can do, what their abilities are, who they're with, how much you can trust them, what kind of area you're in. You just got to make that decision on an individual basis. And I know one person was talking last week or 2 weeks ago about not wanting to make those decisions. Like, she was glad when the principal said they could or couldn't do something because it seems like too much to be making those decisions. On the other hand, as mobility teachers, we're always making a decision. You know, the student could say across the street and I can say, yeah, you're safe, and somebody can come speeding around the corner looking at their texting. So we're always making similar kinds of decisions anyway. But I mean, that's just one idea, to use walkie-talkies or something like that.
And Abby, as other options, there's a lot of times the question about guiding will come up. And there are some students who you can just walk backwards 6 feet ahead of them and guide them with your voice, and others that need that physical contact, either with something like gloves or that ramble tag that you can actually grab onto a handle, so to speak, that's strapped around the arm. There's lots of different ways to do that. It gets a little interesting when you have a long NFB cane, and that's the distance between you and the person in front of you, especially in a crowded environment, because most of us check our brains at the door into the building. So those things, if it puts everybody in more peril just from falling, to have that, we have to really think about what's the bigger danger. Is it if we're wearing masks, does that keep us safer than the possibility of tripping someone by having that cane as an extension between us? So it's part of it's the student, part of it's the environment. It might work great on the track or outdoor in a residential environment, but as soon as you step in the school building, you've got other variables that are beyond our control.
Have we, and I apologize if the question has been asked or the topic has been brought up, has there been any conversation around what parts of an O&M assessment everyone thinks are safe to do remote? Safe meaning you're going to get a good description of the student's abilities.
In the live binder on a remote, I just added something that came from a group in Prince George's County in Maryland, and they had done, basically they coded what would be in person, what would be remote, what the ways that you could deliver an evaluation as much as possible when you couldn't have our traditional way of doing an assessment. And so they came up with some really good ideas. There's lots of different ways to go about that. The only thing I really encourage people not to do, it's just personal opinion, I wouldn't decline service to a student based on what I could see virtually. I think there's lots of situations where we can say, yes, a student does need service, and we can get most of that in and do an addendum when we can be with them face to face. But I would be very hesitant to say that, no, somebody doesn't need O&M when I can't physically be there to get all those things that I would typically get putting them through the paces of an assessment.
Thank you for that. I just downloaded it quickly. That looks interesting.
They're great suggestions and different ways of thinking about things. And some of those are based in the Washington, Maryland area, but you can use your own examples of things, different activities for students to do. But again, there's some things that include parent or family involvement. So if you're gonna ask the parents, could you take them to the grocery store and videotape them finding their favorite cereal box? It can happen on a weekend. It doesn't have to happen during your time, during the school day. They could record it whenever, but they're sharing it at a time that you're available to do that. And then you just want to pick a platform that is they feel comfortable with in terms of safety, and or your school district. Sometimes school districts will say only video can be transferred on Google or Microsoft or whatever they're comfortable with, but trying to be responsible with that, because it becomes personally identifiable information then, because it is an actual video of the student. And has anybody worked with students using technology like apps over remote? To help them with apps, to learn apps or use apps? Those are some other activities where you can have a student using an app, let's say Google Maps, or it could be something more accessible like Blind Square, but basically you're taking a tour or a preview of the app together that you can do either over the phone or through a connection like Zoom. Those are easy ways to keep that learning happening, even though it would be, it's not like going on the bus with them. They're able to get a little bit of detail view, so you can pick some things that they like. If they like going to, let's say, sporting goods stores, you can have them pick a route to a sporting goods store, plan that route. You can preview the different places. Just like using Google Maps on your own to do Street View, this is just an auditory version of that.
One of the things that I did, Chris, remotely is work just with voiceover with my student. And I have a debit card that I keep for my kiddos to use. And he ordered pizza on Grubhub delivered to his house.
Terrific.
While I was on my back porch. And that was pretty fun. And you can watch the progress of the pizza and get to his house. And we worked on math skills with tip and making sure that he can budget the debit card and all that business. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah, and there's probably, you just probably named, Ann, about 7 areas of the expanded core curriculum in there too.
My jam.
Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. How many of you are, oh, couldn't hear you, Kathy.
I've used What's My App, Be My Eyes with my students in the community and had them, you know, kind of a scavenger hunt and have it, they use that app and they love it.
Good, 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 good. Good. And even just helping them to get connected with that, if they're not connected with that already, helping them to log in, create the account, so on and so forth is a great way to just extend their technology a little bit.
I've used Be My App in Montana. I'm in Montana, and we've used Be My Eyes a little bit with the kids when we were going out in public and doing things before all of this COVID stuff hit. And then over the course of that last quarter, we did some maps, like Google Maps, and trying to get the kids, now that we had to use something like a map, some kind of an app on their phones or on their devices that they could plan routes, and really kind of tried to focus on a lot of those cardinal directions and the numbering system. And since some of our kids lived in Great Falls during the school year, but then they are, you know, coming to us from Billings or Helena or other places in Montana, the homework assignment would have been something like plan a route to your favorite restaurant in your community. But I didn't get very good buy-in from our kids over that whole semester or that whole quarter. Just the thought of it makes me cringe. I just didn't feel like it was effective. I wasn't an effective teacher. I didn't get good results. I felt like it felt like, I don't know, it just makes me cringe to think about it.
Well, some of the things that we can do is tap their brains a little bit to find out what's important. In other words, I had a Be My Eyes call yesterday where a young person, I have no idea how old he was asking me, I don't know if he had Power Rangers or whatever toy he was working with, but he had several of them and he wanted to know what color that particular Power Ranger was. But if we think about asking our students to come up with ways that they could use these apps, to think about how they think it could be applied, because sometimes I know I'm guilty of asking students to do things that I think would be interesting for them, but they really don't find them interesting. So because they're in, what's that?
You're cutting out.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for letting me know.
Just repeat, please. Just repeat, please.
I don't know where I left off, so I apologize for redundancy, but basically, having the students make a list of what they think they could do with the app, how they could use it for things like a student asked about what color the toys were that they were playing with. Because sometimes as adults, we impose, for lack of a better way to put it, what we think they're going to find interesting, but that might not be something that they find interesting. So it might be that they're going to use Be My Eyes to organize their Yu-Gi-Oh cards. that they're going to use the app to do something with social media, but they're going to come up with their own ideas of how to use something like Be My Eyes. Where do they think they need assistance? And so it develops their problem-solving ability because they get to begin to generate areas that they need assistance with and how to solve it.
Chris, I really like that idea. Not during COVID times, but I had a student who was older, had a little bit of functional vision, didn't ever use his cane. Then as he became more independent, and I just said, I didn't know what to do with him because of where we were not going anywhere. And I said, look, so-and-so, what do you think we should do on a mobility lesson? He wasn't uncooperative. I mean, it just wasn't working. And he said, well, I usually order cat food for my cat on Chewy, but sometimes I can't get it. So could you take me to this certain a specific Walmart, and then I can learn how, if I could take an Uber, and if I have to get cat food without ordering it. I would have never thought of that in a million years, and that was excuse me, totally functional for him. So I mean, I know this isn't for remote, but just that kind of thinking. And I love hearing different ideas like that because I don't know why, but probably because I heard it somewhere, but maybe because I was ready to give up. I don't know why I asked him. But I mean, and then we did a couple different lessons that were very good because it wasn't even an interest necessarily, but a need. So I mean, and it was an older student, but sometimes the young ones, like you said, Power Ranger colors.
And so I think as adults, we think very textbook and curriculum sometimes, but all we have to do is be able to tie what it is they're interested in into something that has to do with the expanded core curriculum.
That is what I love the most about this job, is that whatever motivates the students is, whatever gets them out of their comfort zone or out of their house or out of their safe little neighborhood is, I mean, every lesson is different. Every day is different. I love that we get, the world is our classroom kind of a thing. I think that's my favorite part about what we do.
So I'm going to ask just to survey a little bit. Is anybody doing anything remotely related to sensory efficiency or using senses? Some of the ideas that I've heard from other places are to have a student take a sensory walk around their house. Like, let's say they go outside and they're listening for the birds or they're listening for traffic, so that you've got the auditory. And then there's things that are tactile, like if they take their shoes off, what can their feet feel? We're getting into autumn time, I hope. We're getting into autumn time where we're going to have different things like the leaves on the ground or pine cones or other things. So some of those tactile things that they might have, lots of different ways that we can ask them to go on sensory adventures, or we can go with them using a phone or other connection. And it can happen indoors, it can happen outdoors, it can happen in the community, it can happen at home. Lots of different ways for that to carry out.
This is Felicia. I have a quick question for, I guess, what's the right term here? The expectation and let's say we are giving assignments or activities and talking about these things. What has anybody put anything in place that's been a good way to, for them to record, or do they just email them or text them or send them things? I feel like when we were in that March to June period in Michigan, where parents didn't have to participate, or kids didn't have to, but for those that did, I had some kids that, were able to give feedback on things that they did, but then others just weren't really held accountable. But now that I think a lot of us are in a place now where it's mandatory to attend in one way or another, does anybody have any systems that they've used that have really helped ensure that these things are getting done, besides verbally just being told that they have?
I can say something, and again, I haven't used it, but was introduced to, you guys familiar, I think it's Flipgrid, but I'm not sure, and I don't know how accessible it is, but it's a cute little app where you just kind of can, maybe like Marco Polo, maybe not, I don't know, where you can just video a really brief video and then send it to someone, and that sounded to me, getting it from somewhere else, that that might be something that would work because it's an app, it's real easy to use, and then they would like, you know, kind of have fun using it. Like I can take you're taking selfies kind of, I can take a selfie and send it to my teacher, and then it's more like fun as opposed to, like you said, just saying I did this or I didn't do this. They're showing themselves doing it or not doing it. But I haven't used it, I haven't tried it.
So that might be that piece of when we're planning with the teams, just trying to find out what would work for that family and how would they best be able to, you know, pass on to us how they've completed these things, or to demonstrate to us that they have in fact participated and done those activities.
And Felicia, sorry, Rose.
I was just going to say, sure, but I wouldn't see Flipgrid as the way to communicate. It would just be a little fun tool to add to whatever way you're communicating, because it's not big enough or whatever to do the whole communication. But just like if they have their own little Flipgrid account, and then they can send you when you ask them to do something, but like if you get together, then you get together some other way.
Yeah,
that's thinking.
That's a great idea. Thank you. I am familiar with Flipgrid. My daughter did do that during the spring for her virtual school. So yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you.
I never used it, but when it was, you know, I went to the other stuff, you know, learning stuff, and it just seemed like it would be really easy. Some of the kids already know how to use it because they've been shown to use it or told or asked to use it in other classes. So, yeah, it just seemed like a fun little thing. Chris, were you going to say something about those?
It wasn't about Flipgrid. It was just some other ways of, you can make Google Forms so that you're basically thinking about the information that you would want feedback on or data collection. And you make a Google form that's easy for the parents to fill out. They sit down, it maybe takes them 3 seconds to check some bubbles. But you can say, did they use their cane? Or how many times did they sweep, or whatever it was that you were looking for data tracking. And so basically you're just making it easy for the parents to report because you're doing the work. For parents that can't even do that, if they're able to take a video, then you can kind of do your own tracking by watching the video, just by watching how long they use their cane for or how long they stay in step for. So there's different ways of keeping track of it if you're doing data collection by asking the parents to do certain things. And then there's also kind of making that one of the activities for the students if they're able to keep track in some way, so that there might even be thinking about how far down the block did you get before your cane found the grass, so that you can tell whether they're shorelining or whether they're sweeping their cane. That'll be a little bit of a higher level function for a student, but we have some students who can do that. Some we have to rely on the siblings or the families to report for us.
I did have some success with one family where the father would follow behind the student and I was virtual watching. The hard part came with knowing how to instruct, you know, and so kind of doing an email ahead of time about what the actual lesson was going to look like, if you will, like a lesson plan, to try to help guide it. But I don't know if they always really read it. So it was always that conflict of, I don't want to sound like I'm being bossy to the parent while we're trying to work through it, but it's like we have to kind of distinguish who's going to say what when, and that was the trickiest thing, and it was kind of humorous. Thankfully, we got a laugh out of it because it was just, you know, me doing it from virtual, watching them doing it, but the parent was learning how to prompt, you know, how that student was used to the O&M prompting, and so it was hilarious, but we got through it and it got better each time. But
yeah, looks like we're being called back into the big room, but thank you so much everyone for sharing. And were there any other topics that you would want, if they had separate breakout rooms, that you would want specific discussions on? I think we had Remote O&M and assessment or evaluation, were there other ones?
I wonder if there's something about social, emotional, you know, the kids that are terrified to travel independently, terrified to go anywhere for O&M lessons. O&M is like a big anxiety maker for some kids, especially now that there's COVID. And I've got a kid who he's terrified to come back to school, and he is coming back, but he's very worried about the virus, and that's just adding to the anxiety.
That's a good topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Or you initiate.
Yeah, well, I'm going to talk to Kathleen, Anita, and I will, but yeah, it will be good. I have certain rules about it too. I don't want anything outside the home. I want inside the home. I don't trust anything.
She didn't have anything in writing, you know, when we had our conversation about it.
Yeah.
Check the website, the ACBREP website, to make sure that there's something there that she hasn't added to students.
Yeah, I'm on the website now.
Under the COVID button that Lucas got Kathleen to do.
What did I do now?
I said the ACBREP website now has an area where all the COVID material is.
I have that queued up if you want me to bring it up. Eileen.
It's pretty easy to locate on the website, isn't it?
Yep, piece of cake.
Yeah, just go to the ACBREP website, Jennifer, and you should see it. I think it's even a different color, as I recall. Sorry. Okay.
Are we all back? I think so. So what I'd like to do is, well, I'll just talk about that for just 1 second. We had, the OMSA board had a meeting with Kathy Sider, and I'd like to ask Eileen if she's willing to review some of that conversation, and then we'll bring up the letter. Eileen, can you do that for me? You're muted, mute.
At our last town hall meeting, Kathy came to our last town hall meeting. We had a really great discussion with her regarding some of the internship and some of the difficulties of getting students to complete their internship. And Kathy was very open to the idea of being rather creative in recognizing the hours that an individual intern would do when they were on the job. So the recommendation was, one, that they should complete their coursework, which most of them had done, take the exam, because you want to take that as soon after your classes so that all the knowledge is right there up front. And then if you were able to be employed, and during your employment, you could complete your hours of internship as long as you had a COMS internship supervisor. It either could be somebody within the same agency that you're in, or somebody even from outside that agency. And Kathy was saying that the universities and the students should make contact with her directly, just so that you make sure you have all your ducks covered before you sort of cross the road, and to make sure that it'll count. So, because sometimes the interpretation of what's being said is understood differently by different people, which we all have had that experience of doing. During that meeting, Lucas suggested to Kathy to do on the website a special area for all the guidelines. All of you should have read the letter that was put out by ACBREP and the guidelines for COVID. It really is rather an important letter. It was the first one that was sort of sent out to give some guidelines to the O&M profession, so you should be aware of that. and that she has been working.
You just have to go on the home page. You don't have to log yourself in. Just scroll down about halfway down and you'll see a yellow bar which has all the COVID related documentation out of ACVREP. And I encourage you to look at that if you haven't. And what I'd like to do now, and we were all very grateful to Kathy for coming to talk to us about that and clarify some of these things. And she's very willing to talk to anyone in the field about this because she recognizes the issues that are outstanding and the solutions that are being created and need to be validated. So what I'd like to do now is just go around the group and ask you to highlight, hopefully you got the recordings, but highlight what how your discussions went today, and I'll start with Justin.
Sure. You always catch me off guard with that, Lucas.
Well, there's only 5 of you.
Yeah. So we had a pretty good discussion in the university group, a lot actually about what we just discussed regarding Kathy Zeider and ACVREP and those guidelines for internships and certification, because we've all been dealing with that same exact thing. And it does sound very promising that at least it's more likely that we can figure out a way to make this all work, even with the craziness going on. And just kind of talked about other issues related to university prep and COVID related to like social distancing and how you do blindfold classes, and some really good discussions though.
Great. Hopefully the recording will have worked this time. All right, I don't want to surprise anyone, but we'll start with someone named Marjorie. What happened in your group? You unmute yourself.
Well, I was enjoying the beach, you know. Okay, so for anybody who may not see it, I've got a background with a nice beach. It looks more like Hawaii, but it could be Florida. Okay, so we had a really lively discussion. We didn't stop talking until we were told to come back in, which was great. We had only 3 of us this time, but we filled it well. We talked about using routines for our 0 to 5 group, especially our really young ones, and within the home, and is really important. And we also had specific activities to start to encourage initiating movement, self-initiated movement, which is really important. We talked about parents and what advice we might be able to give parents in a way that would be understandable since we're not going in the home, how we can go ahead and provide those services to them. And one suggested one way is, you know, using a baby doll and showing the parents, you know, demonstrating the parents through the through video. And we also talked about just how important it is to be able to get these kiddos and work with them and be able to get, how do we get the parents involved, and really being able to get them to where they take more ownership. And we had some great ideas, and that is one way.
A very great resource, noting that Temple University is providing qualifying people across the nation with free iPhones and computers, or a discount towards computers with JAWS and or Zoom text. So those are some of the things we talked about and some resources that we shared with each other.
That sounds like a great thing. If Chris, if you want to, I don't know, or I think you said Nanette provided that. And Nanette, if you want to put some resources up in the chat area there, that would be great. Also, I don't know if Bill Kaler is still here, but he had some stuff that he wanted to let people know about in terms of upcoming meetings. So Bill, if you're still here, I'm not sure you are, if you could post that over in the chat area, that would be terrific. And Chris, you're up. Chris Tab.
Thank you, Lucas. And I apologize in advance if my Wi-Fi disappears again. We had discussions about coaching and parent involvement and how to encourage parents to be involved, knowing that they're going to be having to work or multiple other children. Some discussions about those that are in face-to-face instruction, those that are all virtual, as well as some of those that are in hybrid. And there's some differences based on if it's a required virtual or if it's by choice. There's some options that some districts are offering. If it's by choice, then you're giving the family the choice to come in to do that face-to-face instruction. But how do we keep both the O&M instructor and the students and the families safe? And some of those ramifications. We talked a little bit about Bill Kaler and his discussion about risk assessment that was shared with he and Mary Tellefson and Sarah Moreau. We got into talking about some other resources for how we can keep track of progress, what students are doing, and data collection. We talked about different ways of providing remote instruction, things like sensory activities, as well as ways for students to track activity. One of the resources that was mentioned, I still have to learn a little bit about, is called Flipgrid, but lots of great input from everybody from different sources and perspectives.
Let's see, and I don't know if Bill is still here, and we had a request from Kat Jones for a link for the Temple University iPhone resource. If I think that was Nanette again. If you have that, if you could put it over there in the chat room, that would be great. Have we forgotten a group? Did we get all the groups? Liability, I think we just had Bill and I were just having a chat about that. But I don't think he had, there was nobody in that particular group. Anything else that anyone would like to throw into the stew at this moment? And I would just ask all of you who did recordings I put my email address up there. If you could send them to me, we'll try. What I'm going to try to do is put them into, and Chris, I may be calling on you for assistance with this. Put them into a live binder. I was able to do the first week. I didn't get anything from the second week in particular, I don't think, but we hopefully will get some from this week, and we'll put all of the conversations up into live binder so that if somebody was in one group but wants to see what happened in another group or missed a meeting or so, that you'll be able to get caught up so we don't have to replow old ground. Yeah.
Sorry to get all technical. I believe when I pressed record during the session for the breakout, it didn't give me the option of whether I wanted Zoom to collect it or if I wanted it on my personal. So it may be that you as the host or Zoom is getting this recording. I don't believe it asked me. If I do get it, then I'll do that. But you may be looking for multiple breakout room recordings via the Zoom account for OMSA.
That's possible. I've just forgot. Thank you all for all your wonderful updates. They covered a lot of ground, and if I'd actually recorded them, we would be further ahead than we are now, but I forgot to hit that button myself, so there you go. We'll do the best we can, but I think this sounds like overall across the board, it was a really, really good meeting. Anyone else want to throw anything into the pot?
Lucas, I just wanted to explain a couple of things about how we're operating as far as registration. For future meetings, you will need to register via the Google document that is on the website. I will continue to send out invitations. It'll have the link on there. This has been a learning curve for me, not ever having done registration for even a group this big. And just apologies if our systems are not getting information to you. If you ask for it, doing my best to get it to you, I think it'll continue to be a better process, but we're experiencing some problems with the blast email that people aren't getting them. If you don't get it, look in your spam folder, as I know a lot of systems will catch those. We will not be meeting next week. We're going to take a break for Labor Day, yay, and we will reconvene the following week, which I believe is September 7th, and I'll get information out for that. I'm just, again, hoping to streamline the process so it isn't as much work. It's a little less likely to result in errors on my part, and again, my apologies if people get left out on occasion.
All right. Well, again, it's, I think everyone who doesn't have their camera on